Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I really appreciate you being with me. And again, this is Morning Musings, and I'm involved in a study of Israel's feast days. And we're going to get back to that in the morning as I discuss Sukkot, the joy of the nations, and I'll be going back into Revelation. So you don't want to miss that. Pardon me. But as many, if not most of you know, this last Saturday, October the 26th, 2024, I had a debate with Dr. Richard Carrier. Dr. Carrier is a world famous atheist. He's what is known as a mythicist. He doesn't really even believe that Jesus existed. He certainly doesn't believe the Bible is the Word of God. And he is on record vehemently stating that Jesus, if he existed at all, lied or failed because he predicted his coming in the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. Well, just recently I was invited to debate Dr. Carrier. Actually, it was kind of a mutual suggestion between myself and Derek Lambert of MythVision, mythvision.com on YouTube. And I was thrilled with the prospect of being able to debate such a highly regarded academic. Now, make no mistake, Dr. Carrier's views on whether or not Jesus exists, they're considered fringe. There's literally not that many people in the world. Now, his influence is spreading the idea, but nonetheless, until the 19th century, virtually no one had ever suggested that Jesus did not exist. There's one or two vague references from ancient times, but they were they certainly were not taken with any grain of salt. So anyway, Dr. Carrier believes that if the Gospels accurately record the words of Jesus, then when he predicted his coming and posited it for the first century, that obviously he lied or he failed because very clearly the world didn't end. Earth was not renovated. Jesus didn't come riding out of heaven on as a 5'5" Jewish man riding a cumulus cloud, as I like to express it. So the bottom line is, for Dr. Carrier, Jesus lied or he failed. Now, let me tell you something. I am firmly convinced that there is no futurist, no person holding a futurist view of eschatology can successfully debate Dr. Carrier. It just, it's not in the cards. And you can talk about, postmillennialism. Now we can handle that. No, you can't. No, you cannot. Dr. Carrier is sufficiently educated, to use the term, to know that the hoops through which postmillennialists and partial preterists jump are absolutely untenable. They don't work. He had never debated a full preterist. That was very obvious in our debate. Now, I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed the debate. And this video is to give you my first impressions of the debate, its content, how it went, etc., etc. Now, let me say this. I'm actually filming this on Sunday afternoon. It is currently 5:20 p.m. here in Ardmore, Oklahoma, at the time that I am filming this video for tomorrow. But I just checked on YouTube, and on YouTube, now I'm pretty sure that doesn't count MythVision, but nonetheless, on YouTube, and I checked it like 2 minutes ago, since yesterday afternoon until approximately 5:15, the debate had been viewed 15,000 times. That's pretty amazing. And it shows you the tremendous amount of interest there is in this kind of discussion. And let me say this again. And I have watched debates between atheists and futurists, and in not one of them did the futurists come off well. Not even close. Futurists have no answers for the views of Dr. Carrier. Okay, so I really thoroughly enjoyed the debate. Uh, I just have to say, I had a blast. I really did. Dr. Carrier was very cordial, very courteous. At no time did the debate contain any rancor or anger. Dr. Carrier used some sarcasm from time to time, but it was not ever out of hand. And so I truly appreciate his demeanor. And many, many people, and I've read a bunch of the reviews or a bunch of the comments on YouTube. And what's amazing to me is that the great, great majority of commenters have been atheists. And it has been more than obvious to me that those who made comment were not paying attention to what I actually said. None of them offered any arguments. Now I have to say this one particular individual, I got kind of riled up at this, and he goes, "Well, that dude was kind of a good debater, but..." I go, "Wait a minute, what do you mean, old dude?" And I go, "Oh, wait a minute, yeah, he's talking about me, yeah." So yeah, oh well, that it is what it is. But you see, that's his way of deflecting from the core of the debate. That old dude, he was okay, but he's an old dude. Because he's an old dude, he's supposed, just discount what he said, right? No, sorry, that doesn't work. But so many of them simply repeated what they've heard from Dr. Carrier. They didn't offer any evidence. They didn't offer any arguments. Well, I just don't believe Jesus existed. And it's real obvious that Jesus lied or failed. Anyone can see that. Well, that tells me they didn't watch the debate. They're simply repeating what they believe. But, criticism and ridicule is not refutation. And people don't seem to understand that. You can ridicule all that you want, but ridicule does not answer arguments. And so that's the most glaring thing that jumped out to me as I read the comments on YouTube, that I did not read, and I didn't read every single comment, but I read a bunch of them. I went right down the pages. I did not read one single individual, obviously atheist, who made any kind of a cogent, logical, substantive kind of an argument. It was all just, well, I believe this, or I believe that, or I think Dr. Carrier just blew. One guy said he mopped the floor with this guy. Really? Huh. I was in that debate. Dr. Carrier didn't mop the floor at all. Let me illustrate this. In my opening presentation, I pointed out that Dr. Carrier has a very, very severe logical dilemma on his hands. Here's the reason why. If, as Dr. Carrier claims, if Jesus did not exist at all, then he did not say any of the things that are recorded in the Gospels. Therefore, Dr. Carrier cannot accuse Jesus, who never existed, of making statements about the timing of his coming. He didn't exist, right? If Jesus did exist, and if Jesus did make those statements, then the entire foundation of Dr. Carrier's, quote, ministry and mission, unquote, goes up in flames. Because after all, he goes around the world saying Jesus never existed. But wait a minute. if Jesus actually said those words, then he existed, and Dr. Carrier's platform is completely destroyed. Well, it was pretty obvious to me that that argument made an impact. I know it made an impact on audience. I've had a bunch of private messages to that effect. But Dr. Carrier, in addressing that, said, well, Don Preston seems to think there's a logical problem here for me, et cetera, but he said, there's obviously not a problem. He didn't explain why. Not a word as to why it's not a logical conundrum for him. Let me reiterate, folks. Let me repeat the problem. If Jesus never existed, then he never said any of the words recorded in the Gospels predicting the time and the framework of his coming. Therefore, he can't be called a liar or a failure. If you don't exist, then you don't talk, right? If Jesus did exist, and if Jesus did utter the words found in the Gospels, then Dr. Carrier's entire platform of traveling all of the world saying, oh, Jesus never existed. But if he did exist, and if he did utter the words found in the Gospels, then Dr. Carrier's mission is false. The only question that then remains is, okay, if Jesus uttered those words, did he lie or did he fail? This is an absolutely unbelievably difficult dilemma for Dr. Carrier. And so all he can say is, well, for the purposes of this debate, we're arguing the following. Now, wait a minute. The purpose of the debate is to determine whether or not Jesus lied or failed. In order to determine whether or not Jesus lied or failed, you got to be able to prove that Jesus lived. So by arguing, listen to me, by arguing that Jesus lied or failed, Dr. Carrier is tacitly, implicitly saying, yes, Jesus existed. This is unavoidable, and it's inescapable. And Dr. Carrier cannot simply wave it aside and say, well, no, that's not a problem. There's clearly not a problem here. No, there's a massive problem. He just simply did not want to acknowledge it. That to me was a very, very important point that I repeated a couple of times during the debate. He never once touched it. Never again mentioned it. Now, to me, well, there's several highlights. Okay, I won't be able to get to all of them. I'm sure that William Bell and I will be discussing them on Tuesday night. I am sure Mike Sullivan will be talking about the debate on Friday night. And there's a possibility that even Zach Davis and I will be talking about the debate if we're able to do our video on Thursday. But one of the highlights was during his presentation, and in all of his presentations around the world, Dr. Carrier claims that Jesus, if he existed, agreed with all of the common Jewish belief about eschatology in the first century. That is, the common Jewish belief. And by the way, there was a massive, shall we say, concession. I'll get to it in a moment. Anyway, so Dr. Carrier tells us that Jesus was just another Jew, another Messianic would-be Messiah, just another false prophet running around the countryside, expecting to raise an army and whip the Romans and set up a physical kingdom. This, as I pointed out, there are three pillars that underlie Dr. Carrier's entire paradigm. Okay? Number one, that Jesus agreed with the common Jewish eschatological belief of the day. Number two, as a direct corollary to that Jesus expected a literalistic appearance of the kingdom. and a literalistic, physical, material coming out of heaven as a warrior Messiah. And number three, Dr. Carrier says that the New Testament writers all misused the Old Testament prophecies. I won't have time to discuss that today. I'm real sure, because I was already 15 minutes in here. But point number one, I demonstrated, ladies and gentlemen, without any doubt whatsoever, Jesus did not share the common Jewish belief about a nationalistic, physically restored nation, a physical king on a physical throne. Everything in Jesus' ministry was a categoric rejection of the physical, nationalistic, literalistic expectation of the Jews of his day. One of the key texts that I appeal to twice, Luke chapter 17. And this is where there was a huge admission on, actually two things, by Dr. Carrier. The Pharisees approached Jesus, and remember, the Pharisees had a very, very literalistic concept of resurrection and the kingdom. The kingdom was going to be the restoration of the Davidic, literal, nationalistic, militaristic kingdom with the Messiah sitting on a literal throne in the literal city of Jerusalem. So the Pharisees approached Jesus in Luke chapter 17 and inquired when the kingdom of heaven would be established. And Jesus said, the kingdom does not come with observation. Now, folks, this flies directly in the face of everything that Dr. Carrier affirmed in his first presentation. That is, that Jesus expected a literalistic kingdom, etc., etc. No, Jesus said the kingdom does not come with observation. So we have the Pharisees expecting the coming of the kingdom with observation, and Jesus categorically, explicitly rejecting that view and saying the kingdom of heaven does not come with observation, and the kingdom is in your midst. It's already here. Well, they could look around and see that the Romans hadn't been whipped. The city hadn't been purified. The temple hadn't been purified. The priesthood hadn't been purified. Israel wasn't ruling over the nations. What Jesus said in Luke chapter 17, the kingdom does not come with observation, was, to reiterate, an explicit, overt rejection of the common expectation of the Jews of his day. So how did Dr. Carrier react to that? What was his answer? Well, whereas in his first presentation, he said Jesus held to the widespread, basically universal, Jewish expectation of the day of a literalistic kingdom. So all the Jews believed in a literalistic kingdom. Secondly, he said, and this was amazing. This was literally amazing to me. Don doesn't seem to understand that the word kingdom has a lot of nuances. And he said, we have to understand that the kingdom had always existed. Well, there's no question about that, as I stated. Nobody denies that. That's not what the Pharisees were asking about. The Pharisees were asking about when the kingdom that they wanted, the nationalistic, militaristic, theocratic kingdom that they wanted. When would that be established? By whipping the Romans. And it's that expectation that Jesus absolutely, totally rejected. Well, Dr. Carrier then proceeded to say later in the debate, well, what we see in 1 Corinthians 15, in 1 Thessalonians 4, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, etc., listed 4 passages. They were expecting to see something. They were expecting something literal. Well, if you've been watching my YouTube videos on Now TV, go back and begin when I start talking about, you will see this and know that. Here's what I mean. In the Old Testament and the New, Yahweh would say, I'm going to destroy this nation. This nation is an instrument in my hand, and I'm going to bring them and to destroy this other nation. And when you see this, then you will know that I am the Lord. You'll see this and you'll know that. Jesus said the same thing. In Matthew chapter 24 and verse 30, Jesus taught that in the visible events of the fall of Jerusalem, then shall they see the sign of the Son of Man in the heavens. As Kenneth Gentry, Gary DeMar, Keith Matheson, and a host of other commentators have noted, what Jesus was saying is, when Jerusalem falls, you will know that I am here. This is my presence. This is my parousia. You will know that I am enthroned in the heavens as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So Jesus was saying the exact same thing as in the Old Testament. You will see this and you will know that. So, were they going to optically observe Jesus as a 5'5" Jewish man coming out of heaven on a cumulus cloud? No, they would see the fall of Jerusalem and know that he is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Listen, folks, the idea that Jesus has to come back as a physical man in a physical body completely misses the point, as I cited from 1 Timothy chapter 6, 15. In his own time, Jesus would manifest who is the only true God, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. That's him. He wasn't coming back to reveal himself as a man once again. He was coming back as the Father had demonstrated his deity, his sovereignty in the past. Jesus, who had been given the judgment prerogative, John 5:21, he was going to act in judgment as he has seen the Father judge, so that all men would honor him as they honor the Father. You get the point here? They would see this and know that. So, Dr. Carrier's entire paradigm is dependent on this literalistic approach. And it was, depended upon Jesus agreeing with the common expectation of the day. So, back to those 2 points. When I pointed out how Jesus rejected the Pharisaic view, he rejected the Jewish offer of the kingdom, John chapter 6, verse 15. And I said repeatedly, Jesus was thereby rejecting the common expectation, eschatological expectation of the Jews. Dr. Carrier responded, and I was literally blown away when he pivoted and said, well, we can't literally say that all Jews believe the same thing. Well, that's true. But when you make it a point in your very first affirmation of saying all the Jews believed, here's the common Jewish belief, and you try to convince your audience that Jesus held to the common Jewish belief, then when it is proven that Jesus did not hold to the common Jewish belief, and then you pivot and say, well, not all Jews believe that. What are you arguing? So this, to me, was an extremely telling point of time in the debate. He pivoted from saying all the Jews believe, the common Jewish belief was, to saying, well, not all the Jews believe such and such. So maybe, just maybe, was the implication that Jesus was rejecting this little idiosyncratic view, or maybe this idiosyncratic view, or maybe that distinctive view. No. He was rejecting the Pharisaic view. He was rejecting the view, at least of the audience in John chapter 6, the common view there. Jesus was not rejecting just a little tiny segment of Judaism. What point would that be? and then to pivot and to say, well, you know, the kingdom's always been here. So when Jesus said, the kingdom does not come with observation, folks, that has nothing to do with it. That literally had nothing whatsoever to do with the question, the subject, and the context of Luke chapter 17. The kingdom does not come with observation. Jesus was not talking in vague, broad generalities about the omniscience of God. He was talking about the kingdom expectation and saying what you, the Pharisees, believe about the coming of the kingdom is wrong and it is false. The kingdom is already among you. Okay, I'm going to leave the rest for discussion with William, perhaps Zach, perhaps Mike on Friday. But I think you can see some of the issues that Dr. Carrier was confronted with. His basic appeal was to literalism and to common belief of the Jews. Now, I had a great deal to say about the literalism, and hopefully we can get into that in the rest of this week with some of these different individuals as we discuss the debate. But look, go to YouTube and just look up Richard Carrier versus Don Preston debate. Like I said, as 5 minutes before I walked in here, and this is Sunday afternoon, it is now 5:42, but nonetheless, 16,000 views. Yesterday, or last evening, all right, Saturday evening even, and then Sunday morning, this morning when I finally got to the audience, I was just worn smooth out. But when I got to the office this morning, it was 15,000 views. So just during the day, there's been an additional 1,000 views of the debate. So go there, get your pencil and paper, get your Bibles out, take your notes, and see whether or not I addressed Dr. Carrier's arguments. See if he addressed my arguments. And I think you're going to see, as several people have commented on YouTube and Facebook already, Dr. Carrier did not win the debate, not by a long shot. Okay? Thanks so much for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. We'll get back to our examination of Sukkot and the joy of the nations on the flip side. We'll see you there.